so it's easier to test how much. Oh, Michael's gone. Um, yeah, test
Question,
out.
does this look more or less like a snuff film? Like, how do I look right now? Awesome. Thanks, Cullen. I think it really depends on the type of film. I mean, a lot of people are usually like there's a lot of theater pedants that kind of like the idea of like film is meant to be a communal experience. You go see something. Like, to me, I think it depends on the type of film and the intent of the film. I mean, like, I had only seen Alien on like a bad VHS copy for the first 2 times that I had seen it. But it wasn't until that Blair took me to see it at the Cineplex that I went, okay, this is what they're going for. Because when I was a kid, I was able to process all of the cuts as they were coming to me, and I was able to make sense of the visual information. So when the xenomorph like busts out and does his jazz hands, like, it was never scary, it was never frightening to me. But when I watched it on the big screen, because your eyes are whipping around, right? It's like a dissonance of continuum of movement, because you can't, because you're like, oh, you're looking up here, you're looking up here. You don't even clock the jazz hand time. You just have little like sort of micro impressions on your brain as the cuts keep hitting you. And so to me, like, I think it depends on the intent of a film. I mean, like, I think Alien should ideally be seen on a big screen because your brain can't process the rapidness of the, I don't know if either of those are words, of the cuts, versus something that's like a far more introspective character piece. Like, Blair, we were just talking about Margaret. I'm fairly comfortable you could probably watch Margaret, like, at home, not on a laptop, but like just by yourself. Like, you don't need a communal experience to get by. Whereas I think Alien really, succeeds when you're seeing it with a crowd in that intended form.
For me, it depends on the theater, and because I think a lot of theaters are kind of not putting a lot of effort into their presentation. You have like dim light bulbs and sticky floors and things like that. However, when you have a theater that actually puts care into the presentation, there's really like nothing else like that, even the best home theater. And I'm also, a big proponent of big screens. Like, I really like, full IMAX screen. I just think it really is immersive, and it allows you to pick up on detail that you wouldn't otherwise. And it lets you appreciate just the whole image. I also, on the flip side, on that same note, think that you would be hard pressed to meet a director who didn't, finalize and make their film with theater in mind, and master it for the theater. Same with sound engineers. 90% of the time you're mastering for, of course there are masters for at-home entertainment and things like that, but the real best experience is in a theater for the grand majority of movies, I think, whether it's a drama or an action. Even going so far as to say that, like a movie like Dunkirk, I have little to no interest in watching at home, but that movie in the theater was just, the spectacle of it all was really what was there. So yeah, I think movie theaters are really important, even just as like a communal aspect of having, a night out to go somewhere for overpriced Skittles and popcorn. It's kind of a nice thing to do. But I just wish that they would take better care of the presentation on a lot of those multiplexes and things like that.
So yeah, I'm gonna kind of piggyback on what you said a little bit, but like, I think the atmosphere of a movie theater is really important, and it's sort of in a similar concept of like the point of going to see like a play in a theater is not just that you're interested in like the content or the actual play or even like the actors. Part of it is also being in a crowd, because I think sitting in an audience also changes like a viewing experience for a movie, and so movies. People watching them in a theater, like, part of the thrill is that you're all sort of like feeling the energy together and everything is so much heightened. Or even like a comedy, like, I rarely laugh out loud at a comedy at my house alone. Like, it has to be really funny to me to make me actually laugh out loud when I'm just sitting alone in my room. But if there's other people around me, sort of like, you can feed off of the energy of other people. So I think like that is important. And also just like it being an outing and like going to the theater and seeing it on the big screen, but I think the sound to me is almost more important than the big screen. Like having the sound, especially when there's like a really particular sound design, like especially in a lot of like thrill, or even like I'm thinking of like when I went and saw like Jurassic World even, which isn't like a fantastic movie, but some of the sound design when the dinosaurs are walking around and you can sort of hear them moving around, and it's just different than when you're sitting at home on your couch with like two speakers in front of you. There's a different sort of like tension. So I don't think it is particular movie to movie. Like some movies you can watch at home and they're just as fine. Some movies you can like are better in a theater, but in general, I think just seeing anything with a big group of people is gonna make the experience like a little more of an experience, good or bad.
I you know what? It's everyone's kind of said it. It's easy to agree on, but I think the one thing that really makes it a theater going experience is it is great or it is bad. I have very little in between. It can be so huge and cinematic and suck you into worlds that you like. It's so immersive. I remember seeing Interstellar, which I don't feel is an incredible film, but I remember seeing it on film in IMAX and going through the wormhole and sitting back in my chair and going, man, this is an experience. This is something. And then we've all got those stories where we've gone to a theater and like I watched Gareth Edwards' Godzilla and was staring at a cut in the screen in the corner for the entirety of the film because it bothered me. And then the same thing goes with like technology is with crowds. I've had great crowds. I've had one of my favorite theater going experiences was seeing Unfriended, because I needed to watch something in the middle of the afternoon, and there were 14-year-old girls behind me this must have been their first horror film. To me, it was like schlock. I had already seen all the twists and turns, but to them it was incredible. It's ... you will die, and then they're freaking out. So I think it's both hot and cold. But it's important. But you know, when it's bad, it's bad. It's one of those things. It's what do they say? Like you know, when you're facing a really bad theater experience, there's nothing worse. But when you're facing a really great theater experience, you cannot get over it. So.
Yes, now we can just open it up.
Yeah.
I actually, this is another topic that we have on the list, but I might as well throw it in here. What is a movie that you guys think has to be seen in theaters? Because for me, it is, you know, there's the big spectacle ones like 2001 in 70 millimeter and IMAX was incredible. But the one that I'm going to say you have to see in theaters is Cats, because I had the most incredible movie theater experience I think I've ever had when I went to see Cats. We walked in, it was me and Nigel, walked in, and the entire theater was chanting Cats at the screen, and it was before the trailers had even started rolling. And anytime a cat was in a trailer, everyone would cheer, and the entire movie was spent just shouting at the screen, and just mass confusion on a total scale of everyone just like talking to each other, but in a very communal way with the movie. Like it wasn't an annoyance thing that was detracting from the movie. It made that movie so much better.
I mean, there's films I've seen that like do not deteriorate given what format you're watching them, but really become so much more so much bigger when you see it in large format. I mean, I probably would have kicked myself if I hadn't seen Mad Max Fury Road in IMAX. I saw it in a standard definition the first time I saw it. The next day, I made sure I went to go see it in IMAX 3D. Both times, I cried just because it was like a big experience for me. It was an incredible film. It was just such a moving film. I think that was one of the films that I felt like absolutely needed to be seen. But I could watch it on my phone and get involved in it. Like it's such a great film.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember thinking when I saw like Inception in theaters, like I'm really glad that I was like around to see this when it came out in the theater, because like even just like And I guess now, like, nowadays there's almost those sort of like kind of cool film tricks and these sort of large spectacles are a little bit more common, I guess, or like it maybe that movie would be less impressive. I don't know that for a fact, but I just remember like thinking like so many of those sequences, like the fight in the hallway, or even just like him walking through the town with Ellen Page, which has become sort of like the iconic moment from it. Like seeing that in a big theater with the bass and the like Hans Zimmer like soundtrack just booming, and like everyone in the theater just being kind of completely blown away because none of us knew what this movie was going to be about going into it because the trailers are so vague. But when you said Mad Max Fury Road, I am so glad that I saw that in theaters because I went and saw that with a group of my friends. I think there was 10 of us, and we saw it in this really rowdy theater, and everybody, the entire audience got really into it, and we had all driven separately to the theater, and we were going to get coffee afterwards, and we all drove on the way back listening to just aggressive music on the highway out of all of our cars, screaming at each other through the windows. And it was like that's such a bright spot in my like life of like one of those really nice moments with like this big group of my high school friends and all of us out of our windows in the middle of the night on the QEW in Oakville, like thinking and all pulling into Tim Hortons like kind of like a gang. But like, you know, I'm driving like a 2001 like Dodge Caravan.
Yeah.
Well, it that hits on the head of what I think we've all kind of like just underpinned in all of our points, is the fact that like cinema is needed for community. It brings a lot of people together. It brings.
I disagree. I was actually very sad listening to all of you talk about your great times at the movie because it finally helped me come to grips with the fact that I have never had a good time at a movie theater.
Yeah, Michael forgot to mention that in the Alien presentation that we went to go see with, a young woman stood up and said, and it one of the most tense moments in the film, said, "This is boring and I hate it," and stormed out. And her older date kind of like looked ashamed as he wandered out after her. So it's like that one's a really hot and cold moment where it's like such a good film, everyone's into it except this one woman stood up at the wrong point and like screamed at the screen and the audience and left out. But
that's not even the type of stuff that really gets me, because that's actually sort of a high point, because I'm kind of like, oh, this is new. That's like you know, it's part of the experience. Is just but to me, it's stuff going wrong in the audience is exciting. But to me, like the stuff that always kind of gets me is the uncomfortable performative stuff. Like me and my girlfriend went to go see Back to the Future, which was on the one hand cool to see, but there was also this sort of unspoken understanding amongst the audience that they would clap every time the Silvestri score came on. And I don't mind people I don't mind emphatic responses to media, especially nostalgic media, but like between like Back to the Future and a couple of other sort of throwback films that I saw, I think I like Terminator 2 Judgment Day I saw with Blair. It's one of those things where like, you know, they say the lines or they recognize the image and everyone thunderously applauds while looking over their shoulder to make sure everyone else is doing it. And frankly, it feels inauthentic and sad.
Last word to Michael again.
I like movies.
Yes!
All right. Thanks for watching.
Bye.